A week had passed since the incident at the bus stop, and life had settled back into its normal routine for most people. But for those who had been touched by that morning, things were different. David continued going to school and doing his usual activities, but he found himself paying more attention to elderly people he saw around the neighborhood. He would smile at them, offer to help carry groceries, or simply take a moment to say hello. His small act of kindness toward Rose had awakened something in him, a deeper awareness of the people around him who might need help. Meanwhile, Rose's daughter, Catherine, had made some important decisions. The incident had been a wake-up call that her mother could no longer be left alone safely. She had taken time off work to research care options and had found a wonderful day program at the local senior center where Rose could spend her days in a safe, supervised environment. On this particular Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the bus stop incident, Catherine was driving Rose to her first day at the senior center. Rose was nervous about going somewhere new, but Catherine had explained that there would be other people her age there, and activities to keep her mind engaged. "Will there be nice people there?" Rose asked as they drove through the familiar streets. "Yes, Mom, very nice people, and they understand about memory problems, so you don't have to worry about forgetting things," Catherine reassured her. As they pulled into the parking lot of the senior center, Rose saw a group of elderly people sitting outside on benches enjoying the morning sunshine. Some were reading newspapers, others were chatting, and a few were working on puzzles together. Inside, the center was bright and welcoming. There was a large common room with comfortable chairs, tables for activities, and windows that let in plenty of natural light. The staff members were warm and friendly, immediately making Rose feel at ease. "Welcome, Rose," said Linda, the program coordinator. "We're so happy you're joining us today. Would you like me to show you around?" As Linda gave them a tour, Rose began to relax. She saw people painting, playing card games, and participating in a gentle exercise class. It reminded her of the community center where she used to volunteer before her diagnosis. Catherine kissed her mother goodbye and promised to pick her up in the afternoon. As she drove away, she felt a mixture of sadness and relief. It was hard to admit that her mother needed this level of care, but she knew it was the right decision. Back at the senior center, Rose was introduced to her tablemates for the morning activity, a reminiscence group where participants shared stories from their past. She found herself sitting next to a gentleman named Frank, who had been a bus driver for 30 years before retiring. "I used to drive the city buses," Frank told the group. "Met all kinds of people over the years. Some were grumpy, some were in a hurry, but the ones I remember most are the kind ones. The people who said thank you, who helped other passengers, who made my day a little brighter." Rose listened intently. Something about Frank's story reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite grasp the memory. "Just last week," Frank continued, "I heard a story from my replacement, the guy who took over my old route. He told me about this elderly lady with memory problems who got lost at a bus stop. Nobody would help her for hours until this young boy came along and made sure she got home safely." Rose's eyes widened. "That was me," she said quietly. "I think that was me." Frank looked at her with surprise and warmth. "Really? Well then, you met one of the good ones. That boy sounds like he was raised right." Rose nodded, and for the first time in days she could remember something clearly. "He was so kind. Everyone else just walked away, but he stayed with me until I got on the right bus. I wish I could thank him properly." Linda, who had been listening to the conversation, had an idea. "You know, Rose, we have a community outreach program here. Sometimes we visit local schools to talk to children about respecting elders and helping others. Maybe we could find a way to share your story and let that young man know how much his kindness meant to you." Meanwhile, across town at Lincoln Elementary School, David was in his English class working on a writing assignment about acts of kindness. His teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had asked the students to write about a time when they helped someone or when someone helped them. David was writing about helping Rose, trying to capture not just what happened, but how it had made him feel. As he wrote, he realized that helping Rose had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He found himself being more patient with his younger sister, more helpful to his neighbors, and more aware of people who seemed lonely or confused. His friend Tyler, who sat next to him, looked over at his paper. "What are you writing about?" "I helped this old lady last week who got lost at the bus stop," David explained. "She had Alzheimer's and couldn't remember which bus to take home. Tyler's expression became serious. My grandpa has Alzheimer's too. It's really scary sometimes. He gets confused and doesn't remember who I am. That must be hard, David said sympathetically. This lady seemed really scared when she couldn't remember things, but she was still really nice. Mrs. Peterson had been walking around the classroom checking on students' progress. She stopped at David's desk and read a few lines of his essay. "This is beautiful, David. Would you be willing to share this with the class when you're finished?" David felt nervous about reading his personal story aloud, but he nodded. Maybe sharing it would encourage other kids to help people too. Later that morning, the school's principal, Mr. Rodriguez, made an announcement over the intercom. "Students, we have a special visitor today. Linda. Shen from the Riverside Senior Center is here to talk to our 5th and 6th grade classes about their community partnership program." David's class filed into the auditorium with the other older students. Linda stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation about the Senior Center and the importance of intergenerational connections. "Today I want to tell you about one of our newest members," Linda said. "Her name is Rose, and she joined our program this week after having a very frightening experience. She has Alzheimer's disease, which affects her memory, and last week she got lost at a bus stop." David's heart started beating faster. Could this be the same Rose he had helped? Linda continued. "Rose told us that she stood at that bus stop for over 2 hours asking person after person for help. Everyone ignored her or brushed her off. She was scared and confused and felt completely alone. The auditorium was completely quiet. The students were listening intently to every word. But then, Linda said with a smile, a young boy came along. He was probably about your age. He sat with Rose, helped her figure out which bus to take, made sure the driver knew to help her get off at the right stop, and stayed with her until she was safely on her way home." David felt his cheeks getting warm. Several of his classmates were looking around, wondering if the boy in the story might be someone they knew. Rose wants that young man to know that his kindness saved her day. Because of him, she got home safely to her family. Because of him, she felt less alone and scared. And because of his example, she had the courage to try something new, joining our Senior Center program. Linda looked out at the sea of young faces. The point of this story is that you're never too young to make a real difference in someone's life. One act of kindness, no matter how small it seems to you, can completely change someone's day. After the presentation, as students were filing out of the auditorium, David approached Linda nervously. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I think I might be the boy in your story." Linda's eyes lit up. "Really? You helped Rose at the bus stop?" David nodded. "Is she okay? I've been wondering about her all week." "She's doing wonderfully," Linda assured him, "and she would be so happy to know I found you. Would you like to visit her at the Senior Center? I'm sure she'd love to see you again." David's face broke into a huge smile. "Yes, I'd really like that. Can my mom come too?" "Of course," Linda said. "Rose is going to be so thrilled." As David walked back to class, he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. Not only was Rose safe and doing well, but she had remembered his kindness and wanted to thank him. His grandmother had always said that good deeds came back to you in unexpected ways, and now he was beginning to understand what she meant. That afternoon, when David told his mother about the presentation and the invitation to visit Rose, she immediately agreed to take him to the Senior Center that weekend. "I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging him tight. "Your grandmother would be too." David couldn't wait to see Rose again and to meet the other people at the Senior Center. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of something special. 3 days had passed since the incident at the bus stop, and David couldn't shake the memory of Rose from his mind. He found himself thinking about her during his classes at school, wondering if she was okay and if she had gotten lost again. His teacher had noticed him staring out the window more than usual, but David didn't want to explain what was bothering him. That afternoon, instead of going straight home after school, David decided to take a detour. He walked to Maple Street, telling himself he just wanted to make sure the area was safe and that Rose's house was really there. He wasn't planning to knock on the door or anything like that. He just wanted to see for himself that everything was all right. When he reached number 42, David was relieved to see the small white house with the red door, just as Rose had described it. The garden was well maintained, with beautiful rose bushes that were clearly the pride of whoever tended them. As he stood on the sidewalk looking at the house, the front door opened. A woman in her 40s stepped out to check the mailbox. This had to be Rose's daughter. She had the same gentle eyes as her mother, though they looked tired and worried. When she noticed David standing there, she seemed curious but not alarmed. "Hello there," she said. "Are you looking for someone?" David felt nervous suddenly. He wasn't sure how to explain why he was there without sounding strange. I helped your mom a few days ago at the bus stop. I wanted to make sure she got home okay." The woman's face immediately brightened with recognition and gratitude. "You're David. Please come here. I've been hoping to meet you." She walked over to the sidewalk where David was standing. "I'm Catherine, Rose's daughter. My mother has been talking about you nonstop since Tuesday. She may not remember many things clearly these days, but she remembers your kindness perfectly." David felt a warm feeling in his chest. "Is she doing okay?" "I was worried about her." Catherine's expression became more serious. "She's fine physically, but Tuesday was a wake-up call for me. I realized I can't leave her alone anymore, even for short periods. She's been getting more confused lately, and what happened at the bus stop could have ended much worse if you hadn't been there." "I'm glad I could help," David said simply. "Would you like to see her?" Catherine asked. "She's inside, and I know she'd love to thank you properly. She's been asking me every day if the nice boy from the bus stop might visit." David hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He was curious to see how Rose was doing, and it might put his mind at ease to know she was safe at home. Catherine led him up the walkway to the front door. The inside of the house was cozy and warm, with family photos covering the walls and the smell of fresh-baked cookies in the air. Rose was sitting in a comfortable chair by the window looking through a photo album. "Mom," Catherine said gently, "you have a visitor. Do you remember David, the young man who helped you at the bus stop?" Rose looked up and her face immediately lit up with joy. "David, oh my goodness, you came to visit me." She tried to stand up quickly, but Catherine gently encouraged her to stay seated. David approached her chair and sat down on a nearby stool. "Hello? Mrs. Rose, I just wanted to check and make sure you were doing well." "I'm wonderful now that you're here," Rose said, reaching over to pat his hand. "Catherine, get this boy some cookies, and some milk too." As Catherine went to the kitchen, Rose leaned closer to David. "I want to tell you something important. What you did for me that day. It meant everything. Not just because you helped me find my bus, but because you saw me as a person worth helping." David felt a bit embarrassed by her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same thing. Rose shook her head firmly. "No, dear. I asked many people for help that morning, and they all turned away. But you stopped. You sat with me. You treated me with dignity even though I was confused and scared." Catherine returned with a plate of chocolate chip cookies and a glass of milk for David. She sat down nearby, listening to their conversation. "I've been thinking a lot about that day," Rose continued, "and I realized something. Getting old and sick can make you feel invisible. People start to avoid you because they're uncomfortable with illness, or they're afraid of getting involved, or they just don't know how to help. But you didn't see an old woman with problems. You saw someone who needed help and you gave it." David took a sip of milk and thought about what Rose was saying. "My grandmother always told me that everyone deserves kindness no matter who they are or what problems they have." "Your grandmother was a wise woman," Rose said. "I would have liked to meet her," Catherine spoke up. "David, I want you to know that what you did has inspired me too. Since Tuesday, I've been paying more attention to people around me who might need help. Yesterday at the grocery store, I helped an elderly man reach something on a high shelf. Last week, I probably would have just walked past him." David smiled. "That's really nice of you." "It's funny how kindness can spread like that," Rose observed. "One person does something good, and it encourages others to do good things too." They talked for another hour, with Rose sharing stories about her teaching days and David telling them about school and his friends. Catherine made them all hot chocolate, and for a while it felt like David was visiting his own grandmother. As the afternoon grew later, David knew he needed to head home before his mother started worrying. Catherine walked him to the door while Rose remained in her chair, already looking a bit tired from the excitement of having a visitor. "David," Catherine said quietly, "I want you to know that we've made some changes since Tuesday. I've arranged for a neighbor to check on Mom during the day when I'm at work, and we're looking into getting her a medical alert bracelet in case she gets lost again. That sounds like a good plan, David said. Also, Catherine continued, I know this might sound strange, but would you like to visit again sometime? Mom doesn't have many visitors these days, and she really enjoyed talking with you. I think it reminded her of her teaching days when she worked with young people. David thought about it. He wasn't sure what his mother would think about him visiting an elderly woman he had just met, but something about Rose reminded him of his own grandmother. I'd like that. Maybe I could visit on weekends. That would be wonderful, Catherine said, looking genuinely happy. And David, if you ever need anything, help with homework, someone to talk to, whatever, please don't hesitate to ask. We owe you more than we can ever repay. As David walked home, he felt good about his decision to check on Rose. It was clear that she was being well taken care of, and knowing that made him feel much better about the whole situation. When he got home, his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner. How was school today? She asked. It was good, David said, but I did something after school that I want to tell you about. He explained about visiting Rose and her daughter, and how they had invited him to come back again. His mother listened carefully, asking a few questions to make sure she understood the situation. I think that's very nice, she said finally, but I want to meet this woman and her daughter first just to make sure everything is appropriate. Would that be okay? David nodded. I think they'd like to meet you too. That evening, as David did his homework, he thought about how strange life could be. A few days ago, he had been just a regular kid buying candy at the store. Now he had a new friend and had learned important lessons about kindness, dignity, and how one small action could ripple out and affect many people. He also realized that helping Rose had helped him too. It had given him a sense of purpose and shown him that even young people could make a real difference in someone's life. His grandmother would definitely have been proud. As the number 18 bus pulled up to the stop, David felt a mix of relief and worry. He was happy that Rose would finally get home, but he was also concerned about whether she would be okay once she got on the bus alone. What if she forgot her stop? What if she got confused again? The bus doors opened with a loud hiss and several passengers got off. David gently took Rose's arm to help her stand up from the bench. She was moving slowly, still looking a bit uncertain about everything around her. Is this really my bus? Rose asked, squinting at the number on the front. Yes, this is the number 18, David confirmed. It goes right down Maple Street where you live. As they approached the bus, David noticed the driver looked impatient. There was a line of cars behind the bus, and the driver was clearly in a hurry to keep moving. When he saw Rose moving slowly toward the entrance, he sighed loudly. Come on, lady, I don't have all day, the driver called out. David stepped forward before Rose could respond. Excuse me, sir, but this lady has Alzheimer's and she's trying her best. Could you please be patient with her? The bus driver's expression changed immediately. He looked embarrassed about his rudeness. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Take your time, ma'am. David helped Rose up the steps onto the bus. Once she was inside, he wasn't sure what to do next. He knew he couldn't get on the bus with her since he didn't have money for fare, and his own home was in the opposite direction. But he was worried about leaving her alone. Driver, David said, could you please make sure she gets off at Maple Street? She lives at number 42. The driver nodded. Sure thing, kid. I'll keep an eye on her. Rose turned back to David with tears in her eyes. Thank you so much, sweetheart. I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have been fine, David said with a smile. Someone else would have helped you eventually. But even as he said it, they both knew that wasn't true. David had been the only person in over 2 hours who had bothered to stop and really help her. Rose reached into her purse and pulled out a $5 bill. Here, take this for some candy or something. It's the least I can do. David shook his head. No, thank you, Mrs. Rose. I don't need anything. I'm just glad you're going to get home safely. The other passengers on the bus were watching this interaction with interest. Some seemed moved by the kindness they were witnessing, while others appeared impatient to get moving. All aboard, the driver called out. We need to get going. David stepped back off the bus, but he stayed at the door for a moment longer. Mrs. Rose, when you get to Maple Street, just tell the driver you need to get off. He'll help you. Rose nodded, though David could see she was already starting to look confused again. The stress of the morning and the change in environment were affecting her memory. As the bus doors closed, David waved goodbye. He watched through the window as Rose found a seat near the front. The bus pulled away from the curb, and David stood there for a moment, hoping everything would work out. Several people who had witnessed the entire interaction were still at the bus stop, waiting for their own buses. One elderly man approached David. "That was a very nice thing you did, young man," he said. "Not many people your age would have taken the time to help like that." David felt a bit embarrassed by the praise. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," the man said firmly. "Most people wouldn't have. I watched for 2 hours as person after person ignored that poor woman. You were the only one who stopped to help." A woman who had been waiting nearby overheard the conversation. She was one of the people who had earlier refused to help Rose. Now she looked ashamed of her behavior. "I feel terrible," she admitted. "I saw her asking for help, but I was running late for work and I didn't want to get involved." David didn't judge her. He understood that people had their own problems and responsibilities. "It's okay," he said. "Sometimes we all get too busy to notice when someone needs help." But the woman shook her head. "No, it's not okay. That could have been my own grandmother. I should have helped her." As David started to walk home, he couldn't stop thinking about Rose. He wondered if she had made it to her stop safely. He wondered if her family knew she had gotten lost. He wondered how many other people like Rose were out there, struggling with confusion and being ignored by a world that had become too busy to care. Meanwhile, on the bus, Rose was indeed having trouble remembering where she was supposed to get off. The familiar landmarks outside the window didn't look familiar anymore. Everything seemed strange and frightening again. The bus driver, true to his word, was keeping an eye on her. When they reached Maple Street, he called out, "Maple Street." "Ma'am, this is your stop." Rose looked around uncertainly. "Is this where I live?" "According to that young man who helped you, yes," the driver said kindly. "Number 42 Maple Street." Rose slowly made her way to the front of the bus. The driver waited patiently as she carefully descended the steps. Once she was safely on the sidewalk, he pointed down the street. "Your house should be just down that way," he said. "Do you see any house that looks familiar?" Rose looked around and suddenly her face lit up. There, just a few houses down, was a small white house with a red door and a garden full of roses. It was her house. She remembered now. "Yes, that's it," she said, pointing excitedly. "That's my home." The bus driver smiled. "Good. You take care now." As the bus drove away, Rose walked slowly toward her house. Her daughter's car was in the driveway, which meant she was home from work. Rose felt a wave of relief wash over her. When she opened the front door, her daughter Catherine rushed over to her, looking worried and relieved at the same time. "Mom, where have you been? I came home for lunch and you weren't here." "I've been worried sick." Rose tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out jumbled and confused. She mentioned the bus stop, getting lost, and a kind boy who helped her, but the details were already becoming fuzzy in her memory. Catherine helped her mother sit down and brought her a glass of water. "It's okay, Mom, you're home now. That's all that matters." But Catherine was clearly shaken by the incident. She realized that her mother's condition was getting worse and that leaving her alone, even for short periods, was becoming dangerous. Back at the bus stop, David had finally caught his own bus home. As he sat by the window, he thought about what his grandmother would have said about the morning's events. She probably would have told him that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed like a small gesture. He also thought about all the people who had ignored Rose. He didn't hate them or think they were bad people. He understood that life was complicated and people had their own struggles. But he also realized that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply stop and pay attention to the person next to you who might need help. When David got home, his mother asked him why he was so late from the store. He told her about Rose and what had happened. His mother listened carefully, and when he finished, she hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Your grandmother would be proud too." That evening, David couldn't stop thinking about Rose. He hoped she was safe at home with her family. He hoped someone was taking care of her. And he hoped that maybe, just maybe, his small act of kindness had made her day a little bit brighter. The young boy finished buying his candy and walked back toward the bus stop. He kept glancing at Rose, who was still sitting on the bench looking more confused than before. Her hands were shaking slightly as she tried to open her purse, probably looking for something that might help her remember where she was supposed to go. Most kids his age would have walked past without a second thought. After all, talking to strangers wasn't something children were usually encouraged to do. But something deep inside him wouldn't let him just walk away. His grandmother had always told him that helping others was never wrong, especially when someone was clearly in trouble. He approached the bench slowly, not wanting to scare Rose. When he was a few feet away, he spoke in a gentle voice. "Hello, ma'am. Are you okay?" Rose looked up, surprised that someone was actually talking to her. For a moment, she wasn't sure if the boy was real or if her mind was playing tricks on her again. When she realized he was genuinely asking about her well-being, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "Oh, hello there," she said, her voice trembling.
"I'm a bit lost, sweetheart."
"I can't seem to remember which bus I need to take to get home." The boy sat down on the bench next to her, keeping a respectful distance. "That's okay. Sometimes people forget things. Do you remember your address or the name of your street?" Rose thought hard, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I live on Maple Street, I think. Or maybe it was Oak Street. There are so many trees." She trailed off, looking frustrated with herself. "Don't worry," the boy said calmly. "We'll figure it out together. Do you have anything in your purse that might help? Maybe a piece of paper with your address?" Rose opened her purse with shaking hands. Inside were the usual items: a wallet, some tissues, reading glasses, and a few other personal belongings. The boy noticed a small card tucked into one of the compartments. "What's that card there?" he asked, pointing gently. Rose pulled out a laminated card. On it was written her name, address, and phone number, along with a note that said, "If found, please call," followed by a phone number. It had been prepared by her daughter for exactly this kind of situation. "This is perfect," the boy said, smiling. "This has your address on it. You live on Maple Street, number 42. Do you remember this now?" Rose looked at the card and nodded slowly. "Yes, that's right. But I still don't know which bus goes there." The boy studied the bus schedule on the board. Unlike Rose, he could read it clearly and understand the route numbers. The number 18 bus goes down Maple Street. It should be here in about 15 minutes. While they waited, other people at the bus stop began to notice the interaction. Some looked curious, others seemed annoyed that a child was getting involved in what they considered an adult problem. A few people whispered among themselves, but the boy paid no attention to them. "What's your name?" Rose asked, feeling more comfortable now. "I'm David," the boy replied. "What's yours?" "I'm Rose. Thank you for helping me, David. You're very kind." David smiled. "My grandmother always told me to help people when they need it. She said that's how we make the world a better place." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," Rose said. "Where is she now?" David's expression became a little sad. "She passed away last year, but I still try to do the things she taught me." Rose reached over and gently patted his hand. "I'm sorry for your loss, dear, but I can tell she raised you well. She would be very proud of you right now." As they continued talking, Rose began to relax. David told her about school and his favorite subjects. Rose found herself remembering things about her own past. How she used to be a teacher, how she loved working with children, and how much she missed those days when her mind was sharp and clear. "I used to teach children your age," Rose said. "Third grade was my favorite. The children were old enough to have real conversations, but still young enough to be excited about learning new things." "That sounds really cool," David said genuinely. "What was your favorite thing to teach?" "Reading," Rose answered without hesitation. "I loved helping children discover the magic of books. There's nothing quite like seeing a child's face light up when they understand a story for the first time." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a bus. It wasn't the number 18, but several people at the bus stop got on. As the bus pulled away, David noticed that some of the remaining people were still staring at them with disapproving looks. A middle-aged woman approached them. David thought she might be coming to help, but instead she spoke directly to him with a stern voice. "Young man, you shouldn't be talking to strangers. Where are your parents?" David looked up at her politely. "I'm just helping this lady find her bus home." She was confused and no one else would help her. The woman frowned. "That's not your responsibility. You could get in trouble or put yourself in danger." Rose felt terrible that David was being scolded because of her. "Please don't blame the boy," she said. "He's just being kind. I have Alzheimer's and I got confused about which bus to take. He's helping me get home safely." The woman's expression softened slightly when she heard about Rose's condition, but she still looked uncomfortable. "Well, maybe you should call someone from your family instead." "We found her emergency contact card," David explained, showing the woman. "Her bus will be here soon." The woman walked away, shaking her head. She clearly thought David was making a mistake by getting involved, but she didn't try to stop him. A few minutes later, another person approached, this time a security guard who worked in a nearby building. He had noticed the commotion and came over to investigate. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking concerned. David explained the situation again, showing the guard Rose's identification card. The guard nodded approvingly. "That's very responsible of you, son. Not many people would take the time to help like this." He turned to Rose. "Ma'am, do you need me to call anyone for you?" Rose shook her head. "Thank you, but David has been taking excellent care of me. We're just waiting for my bus now." The guard smiled and walked away, but not before giving David an encouraging nod. It felt good to have an adult approve of what he was doing, especially after being criticized by the woman earlier. As they continued to wait, David noticed that Rose seemed to be getting tired. The morning had been stressful for her, and the confusion was clearly exhausting. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked. "Do you want some water? I can get you some from the store." "I'm all right, dear. Just a little tired. This happens sometimes when I get confused. My daughter says it's normal." David nodded understandingly. He was mature beyond his years, partly because of the lessons his grandmother had taught him and partly because of the challenges his own family had faced. Just then, they saw the number 18 bus approaching in the distance. David stood up and gently helped Rose to her feet. "There's your bus," he said with a smile. "You're going to be home soon." The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy street as people hurried to catch their buses. It was just another Tuesday in the city, with everyone focused on getting to work on time. The bus stop was crowded as usual, filled with office workers checking their phones and students adjusting their backpacks. Among the crowd stood an elderly woman in her 70s. Her gray hair was neatly combed, and she wore a simple blue dress with a worn cardigan. She held a small purse close to her chest and looked around with confused eyes. Her name was Rose, and she had been living with Alzheimer's disease for the past 3 years. Rose had woken up that morning feeling lost. She remembered putting on her dress and walking out of her apartment, but now she couldn't recall where she was supposed to go. The faces around her seemed familiar yet strange at the same time. She tried to ask someone for help, but the words wouldn't come out right. "Excuse me," she said softly to a man in a business suit standing nearby. "I think I'm supposed to be somewhere, but I can't remember where." The man glanced at her briefly, then looked away. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through emails, pretending he hadn't heard her. Rose felt a pang of sadness, but tried again with another person. A young woman with headphones was standing a few feet away. Rose gently tapped her shoulder. "Hello, dear. Could you help me? I'm a bit confused about which bus to take." The woman removed one earbud and looked annoyed. "I don't know, lady. Just read the schedule," she said, pointing to a board covered with route numbers and times that meant nothing to Rose. The woman put her headphone back in and turned away. Rose stared at the schedule board, but the numbers and letters seemed to dance before her eyes. Nothing made sense anymore. She felt her heart racing as panic began to set in. Where was she supposed to go? Why couldn't she remember something so simple? An older gentleman noticed her distress and approached. For a moment, Rose felt hopeful. Maybe he would understand and help her. But when she explained her confusion, he just shook his head. "Sorry, I can't deal with this right now. I have an important meeting," he said, moving away from her toward the other end of the bus stop. One by one, Rose tried to get help from the people around her. Each time she was met with the same response. Some people ignored her completely, while others gave her quick, dismissive answers before walking away. A few even seemed uncomfortable, as if her condition might be contagious. A teenage girl looked sympathetic when Rose approached her, but her friends quickly pulled her away. "Don't get involved," one of them whispered loudly enough for Rose to hear. "You never know what's wrong with people like that." Rose felt invisible, like a ghost among the living. She had once been a teacher, respected by her students and colleagues. She had raised 2 children and volunteered at the local community center. Now she couldn't even remember how to get home, and no one seemed to care. The buses came and went, and people boarded them without giving Rose a second thought. She remained standing there, growing more confused and frightened with each passing minute. Her legs began to ache, but she was afraid to sit down on the bench because she might forget to get up when her bus arrived. If only she could remember which bus that was. As the morning progressed, the crowd at the bus stop changed. The office workers left for their jobs, replaced by shoppers and people running errands. But Rose's situation remained the same. She was still lost, still confused, and still being ignored by everyone around her. A mother with a stroller approached the bus stop. Rose thought maybe another woman would be more understanding, more willing to help. She walked over slowly, not wanting to startle the young mother. "Hello?" Rose said gently. "I'm having trouble remembering which bus I need to take. Could you help me?" The mother looked at Rose suspiciously and pulled her stroller closer to herself. "I don't know anything about the buses," she lied, even though she had been taking the same route for years. She moved to the far end of the bus stop, casting worried glances back at Rose. Rose felt tears forming in her eyes. She wasn't dangerous or crazy. She was just scared and confused. Why couldn't anyone see that she was simply a person who needed help? A group of teenagers gathered near the bus stop, laughing and joking among themselves. One of them noticed Rose standing alone and pointed her out to his friends. They began whispering and giggling, making Rose feel even more self-conscious. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language made it clear they were talking about her. The sun was getting higher now, and Rose was feeling tired and thirsty. She had been standing at the bus stop for over 2 hours, and her confusion was getting worse. Sometimes she forgot where she was entirely, thinking she was waiting outside her old school or at the doctor's office. A delivery truck stopped nearby, and the driver got out to make a delivery. Rose approached him hopefully. Delivery drivers were usually friendly people, she thought. Surely he would help her. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm lost," she said. "I need to get home, but I can't remember which bus to take." The driver looked at her with mild annoyance. "Lady, I'm just trying to do my job. Call someone to pick you up or something." He walked away quickly, leaving Rose standing there feeling more defeated than ever. Rose sat down on the bench finally, her legs too tired to support her any longer. She clutched her purse and looked around at all the people who continued to ignore her. She wondered if this was what the rest of her life would be like, being invisible, being forgotten, being treated like she didn't matter. The irony wasn't lost on her. In a world more connected than ever before, with people constantly talking on phones and messaging each other, she felt completely alone. Technology had brought people closer together, yet somehow made them more distant from the person sitting right next to them. As Rose sat there struggling to hold back tears, she didn't notice the young boy who had been observing the situation from across the street. He had been walking to the corner store to buy candy when he first saw the elderly woman being turned away by person after person. The boy was probably around 12 years old, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He had been taught by his grandmother to always respect elders and help those in need. Unlike the adults at the bus stop, he saw Rose not as a problem to avoid, but as someone's grandmother who needed assistance. Something about the woman reminded him of his own grandmother, who had passed away the year before. She used to tell him stories about kindness and how small acts of compassion could change someone's entire day. As he watched Rose sitting alone on the bench looking so sad and lost, he knew exactly what his grandmother would have wanted him to do.